There is JohnBerry555 and welcome to my 10-part miniseries where I'm going to be reviewing the HBO miniseries Band of Brothers, which was created by Steven Spielberg and Tom Hanks. So a quick overview real quick. The Band of Brothers follows E Company or EZ Company of the 505th, I believe, Parachute Infantry Division of the 101st Airborne. Not 505th, 506th Parachute Infantry Regiment of the 101st Airborne Division. Have some notes here so that way so I can check this stuff up, make sure I got everything correct. But yeah, it follows their adventures from basically their training all the way to being sent home. So we're going to start off with part 1, episode Kira Hay, and we're going to end up with part 10 points. So expect that this is going to be one episode a week, so this is going to be a 10-week long miniseries for me. And today we're going to be talking about the hardest thing I've ever had to watch. This is part 9, episode 9, Why We Fight. This is the hardest one for me. I paused this one, I lost count, several times. It's just, I think you know what I'm getting at. This is when they discover a concentration camp. This is the hardest one for me. It's just so emotional. I remember pausing several times, leading up to it, the dread. I knew what was coming. I knew what was coming when they didn't, because I know my history. And it was so hard. I paused, I think at least twice before they discovered the camp. And when they discovered it, I paused. I had to take walks. It was so emotional, so hard to watch. I know the history, but the emotions are still there. This, in some ways, when you have to stop something and pause, that's either a good thing or a bad thing. In this case, it's a good thing, because we can only imagine how hard it was for the soldiers who discovered the concentration camp. But the fact is, you make the emotion so hard that you actually have to stop watching just to process what you just watched, just so you could even continue, just to pause again in another few minutes. It is so hard to watch. But in sense, it makes sense why this is one. This is why, the episode is why we fight for a reason. They are struggling. Captain Nixon, with, he's pretty much out of his favorite whiskey, VAT 69, so he's trying to find some, because he really doesn't want to drink the local stuff. He has his preferred brand. You have also just EZ Company as a whole. They just kind of they've been there, so many of them have died. They're losing the will, not the will to fight, why they're in this. But then they discover a concentration camp. It enrages them. It breaks them. It is so hard. It is so hard for them. It's hard for me to watch, and it's just, there's a reason why this review is going to be the only one where I'm not having Band of Brothers in the title, where I'm just simply calling it the hardest thing I've ever watched. Because that's what it is. There's been other shows I've watched where I've paused, had to take a break, but that's normally not because it was difficult or too emotional, but because, I know exactly what's going to happen. And for those shows, it was not in a good way like this. If this can be considered a good way. But I'm talking about good from well done story. Well done filming. Before it was always I know exactly what's going to happen. They're trying to be not either sneaky or clever, and it's just not working. I can't believe they're doing this. But here, it's so different. Here, it's raw. It's emotional. It's difficult. These are tragic events. Events that should never be forgotten. But it's hard to watch, because it's so tragic, so brutal what happened to the victims of the Holocaust. It is just hard. It is full of emotion. It's a tragedy. I'm just trying to describe it in the best I can. I'm struggling not to break down. I cried watching this. There's been other times where I've cried when watching something sad, but there's two different kinds of crying. Your simple tearing up cry, and where your eyes are physically struggling not to cry. That's the kind of cry this is. This is not just a tear escaping. This is just a difficult thing. Your entire body knows what's going to happen. Your body is fighting against it, but it needs to do it. It's emotional, tragic, and I'm getting the same. I didn't rewatch this episode, and that's simply because I don't know if I can ever actually rewatch it. But that's, in a way, a huge endorsement of it, because it's so emotional. I don't know if I can bear those emotions again. Some of the best Holocaust films out there have the main people have those same reactions. It's just so emotional. You can only watch it once or twice, and that's it, because it's just too emotional, too raw, too emotional. There's no other way. In some ways, I think back to how sometimes, before, face-to-face communication, language had to be a lot more adjective or the flowery, for a better term, to really convey things like, Eleanor of Aquitaine, after Richard the Lionheart was being put up for ransom by the Holy Roman Empire, like, she wrote a letter to the Pope where she described that she would rather be dead than her son be captured, and bunch of crazy stuff, like, that makes no sense, and probably she didn't actually want to do it, but it was the best way of conveying her emotions. And that's why I'm struggling with her. How to convey the emotions I felt about this episode without going over the top or being disrespectful. Without going over the top or being disrespectful. It is a struggle. And that's why this is the hardest thing I ever watched. Not just was it hard for me to watch, but it's also hard for me to describe why it was so hard. Perhaps the only way for you to understand my emotions is to watch it yourself. There's so much more I could talk about in here, but the main thing is the members don't believe that the Germans were the members of the Reason Company. They don't believe the Germans didn't know what was going on. But the thing is, this happened over and over. Concentration camps would be liberated by the Allies, Western Allies, and they were in shock, disgust, and there were many cases where they started killing prisoners because they were just so angry, so mad, because they were disgusted by what had occurred there, so they took it out on the guards. In some cases had surrendered, some cases had vanished. There was I know one story, one of the first concentration camp liberated by the Allies. By the time of Easy Company, the first one had already been discovered. The concentration, they come out of the sub one of Dachau, so the most notorious one, the first one. Well, concentration, not death camp. There's a difference. There is a huge difference. You could get killed at a concentration camp, but you were also being worked to death. You were not there just to be killed. That's the only difference. A death camp like Auschwitz was sole purpose to kill. All the concentration camps like Dachau were there to work you to death. Tragic, ruthless, disgusting. But it's a fact. That's history. And we can't forget it. Okay, calm down after all that. But, so they discovered the camp. Actually, I was going to say, there's stories of American soldiers, forcing German civilians nearby to go and take a look at what it is, by gunpoint. That wasn't shown here because that didn't happen in this case. But it probably did. But it is true that the area was placed under martial law, and the civilians were ordered to bury the bodies. And also probably one of the things that also got me to pause is, so they want to do something to help the concentration camp victims. And so, they go in, basically take whatever food and water they can in town, but eventually regimental, and in fact maybe even higher up, like brigade comes up and basically the surgeon there said, you can't give them food and water, they gotta be carefully giving them food slowly and all that, and close the camp, we don't have a place for them, gotta keep them there for now. And that's hard for Easy Company to do because they're seeing people suffering and they want to do something, but the thing they have to do medically is hard for them to do because it seems heartless. Like, if someone is hungry, your instinct is to give them food and water, not wait for doctors to come up to give them, to slowly build up their stomach and to slowly give them food again. Because the sad truth is, people who are in such, not just hungry, like, if you haven't had food all day, you're hungry, that kind of hunger? Yeah, that's how this is, you haven't had food in weeks, if not months. And if you eat a normal meal, you're going to get sick. your body has adjusted to no food. And so we saw this with many prisoners in the Pacific too. No, they get rescued, eat a meal, and they end up sick because they couldn't take the food. And that's for what has to happen here. The concentration camp victims can't be fed yet because they need to be done so under medical supervision. So like small amounts of food. So like probably starts with maybe a slice of bread and a sip of water and whatever it is they decide to feed. And probably can't do too rich of foods as well. That's what this episode is about. Sure, they're also, going into Bavaria, Berchtesgaden, going after that stuff. But that's all minor. In fact, that's actually in the next episode. But they're on the way there at this episode. But this episode is about essentially showing the men of Reason Company regaining their will to fight and why they're fighting again. But having to do so in the most hard way possible, the tragedy of it all. Again, there's a reason why this episode is the hardest thing I've ever had to watch, and probably the hardest review I've ever had to make. I've had difficult reviews before, like struggling for motivation, but this is hard in a different way. Not hard in terms of technical stuff or just getting the motivation you're going to do it. This is hard from an emotional standpoint. I may even have to take a break before I record my last review for this. I'm recording these all in one sitting, and it's hard now. It was getting tough before because, I've been doing a lot, but this is hard in a different way, in a draining way. It's drained me. So much emotion, it's so hard to put it out there for me. I'm an introvert naturally, so it's hard for me to put myself out there too much. There's a reason why my better streams are my shorter ones. I'm better engaged, I'm not tired. But this is giving me that same feeling, tiring me out because I'm putting myself out emotionally in a way I am not used to. This is the hardest thing for me to watch, and probably the hardest review I've ever had to done, and probably ever will done. Unless I go watch, one of the Holocaust films, which, again, emotionally, I don't know if I can. I should, from a historical standpoint, but the emotions are tough and are difficult.